the least we can do when we're not going to be on the right side is have a record that we were at least on the wrong side of history. And in considering this amendment that is about food insecurity, and we use all these warm, fuzzy terms about getting kids ready for school, it is an invitation to consider what makes us think that our children are uniquely deserving of wellness. This amendment harkens to the time when even before a lot of folks just learned about certain history in recent months, but many more of us know our history goes way further back. Food insecurity was already plaguing. There was already a UN list of corporations that were contributing to starvation and malnutrition in the occupied territories. Even before the bombardment that you can watch being live streamed, 60% in September of children were considered food insecure. And so this amendment gives us the opportunity to not be in the company of folks who are comfortable with it. We should have no appetite for apartheid. The food insecurity, what I'm about to say, look, I give people a lot of grace if they didn't know this, because there's a time in my life when I also didn't know what I'm about to say, but then I turned 6 years old. But the fact that it is the same folks who profit off of Colorado children remaining food insecure are aligned with those who profit off of poverty abroad. This amendment gives us a chance to extricate this state, as some cities and other municipalities have done, from being an active participant in this. The food insecurity, it's such a weird phrase because it sounds passive. It's food insecurity. Children are being starved. We have enough here. Communities are being abandoned. I've seen, I don't want to say bragging, but I've seen folks tout the increased number of EBT benefits that are getting to children. You have to be real careful when we celebrate that. And as glad as we are about summer EBT, the easiest yes, or one of the easiest yes votes I would cast this year, we have to be real careful when we celebrate a version of that without this amendment, because it's similar to I don't know if I'm allowed to mention that it's cultural to give an analogy, or if that's, but this amendment, the folks who support this work are often the same folks who support holiday turkey giveaways. And you have to be careful if you celebrate you're giving away more turkeys this year than last year. We're glad that people are getting fed, but that means you haven't curbed the insecurity. SNAP should be working itself out of business. Not a business. The goal isn't to have to subsidize more food, it's to have less children hungry. And we get further away from that goal when we decide Palestinian children aren't a part of the children we care about. It is a condition. It is a condition of the occupation. This is not my political analysis. This is the whole world's understanding. It is a condition of the occupation that a government exercises complete control over the type and amount of food that enters, or rather does not enter, Gaza. Colorado tax dollars are underwriting that, are underwriting the blockade. This amendment is directly connected to the last one I read was the 2021 Amnesty International report that detailed the specific restrictions on Palestinian food supplies that, while in magnitude and number and name and type, are obviously different from the restrictions on Colorado families. They are similar in that there are folks with concentrated power who have more than enough, hoarding resources, the basic ones, food and water, at the expense of others. Too many Colorado children who will be helped by the passage of this bill as amended. They're not strangers to state violence, and neither are Palestinian children. I don't need everyone to understand what factors came together to make much of the world aware in this moment, but we are aware. And we can come together and work on property tax and quibble over who offered the best solutions. I mean, with all of our solutions, we're not doing enough to focus on the most marginalized, but we're trying, and that's progress. And this amendment gives us the opportunity to not do that without acknowledging that our decisions are interconnected. These things are not separate. I need my neighbors to understand that you are never going to get affordable housing or health care from folks who don't oppose ethnic cleansing. And this amendment that'll go down like, I don't want Representative Basenecker fussing at me, but the 1978, if I could have read it, they were so much bolder and braver. They were so much more eloquent. They were so much more direct and accusatory by calling out who are the actors that are causing the harm. Whether it's in 1 year or 5 that pass after this amendment, that I go to be with my mother in a heaven I don't believe in, it will have mattered to be on the right side. As a child who needed these benefits, and I was a child when I became a mom, I was 16, of a baby who needed these benefits. The idea that it's that offensive to even talk about how we would allocate these resources is an anathema to the justice and the goodness we're working for. I wish I could have fit more instances of the word children in this amendment because words matter. And in recent weeks, we've heard the phrasing that for one group of folks, it's children, for another group of folks, it's young people. Colorado children, our kiddos. They're not vermin, they're not children of the dark, they're our children. And if our children I started to say we're living in, but we're dying under conditions where the water treatment facilities have ground to a halt. If our children, the children who benefit from this bill and who are referenced in this amendment, if doctors were picking which of our children to carry under their arms out of a hospital, we would be up in arms as well we should. And this amendment doesn't even call on us to do what we should do, which is act. This amendment reminds me of I'm just going to quote our colleague from earlier about this amendment. No, I'm not. In drafting this amendment, was very clear with the incredibly brilliant and kind and patient drafter that she did not need to worry about the super technicalities because it wouldn't pass, but they're very committed to their job and they have to write it as if it did pass, how would it work, and I really appreciate that, but I kept telling her, please, you don't have to worry about that. And I'm embarrassed to admit that while it was fully my expectation to be standing alone, because standing alone in this body, to be clear, is not standing alone. The whole world. It's not a Palestinian cause who's fighting for Palestinian liberation. It's a special kind of erasure to act like amongst those supporting this bill wouldn't be the thousands of Jews who are shutting down consulates in Illinois and train stations in DC and taking over streets in Indonesia and not so much Jews there, but and in Tel Aviv and in marching. This amendment aligns when we're fighting for food security with the many young Israeli teenagers who have now been caged for refusing their military service. Arrested. I'm an abolitionist, I tend to say caged. Teenagers, still children themselves, who care about the food nutrition of their fellow Israelis as well, you can be both, but as well as Palestinians. Those children, 18 and 19-year-olds, would ask us to do what we could. And if all we can do, I care about the chair's admonition. It's hard to phrase the amendment without being, there's no decorum, there's nothing civil about genocide. How we spend and allocate and allow our resources to be allocated, I mean, it's cultural, it's also neurodivergent than not finishing a thought. But I'm embarrassed to admit, I keep going back and forth about if I want to quote what she said or not, but I'm embarrassed to admit that while I fully expected it to be 64-1, I guess I have to ask you to vote yes, but really what I want to ask is in a few years when there are no Palestinian children left, because that is what will happen if we keep turning a blind eye to the ethnic cleansing happening on our watch, that we'll say never again and we'll stand up for the next round.
The time for debate has expired. The question before us is the adoption of Amendment L12. The House will stand in a brief recess.